Is the Philippines losing its edge on the Philippines, or are people just catching up either way? But also, as in being involved in the Ayala schools, and you have schools now in Bicol. Again, I would still pursue that question about language and the medium of the education. What have you learned so far about needing to localize content and providing and meeting the students where they are?
Okay, so a few questions here. Let's unpack it. One, where's the Philippines at with English? It's still the #1 country in the world where English is spoken as a second language. Still. But two, it's losing ground. Many countries are catching up to it. And there's new data showing that. And that's an issue for this country because from a comparative advantage perspective, speaking in economic terms, this is the #1 comparative advantage this country has. #1 source of GDP is maybe BPOs or maybe it's OFWs, but they both rely on English. So #1 and #2 source of GDP rely on English. That's really critical. It's something that the country can't ignore. What does Ayala Education do about it? Our schools are all in English. Our 7 through 12 is completely in English. We have had a pretty successful track record with that. Years ago, back in the early 2000s, before we ever started Ayala Education, we brought linguists into the country. And we developed a framework for evaluating oral English sensitive to the local dialects. And that framework specifically, that money spent, that research done, has underpinned everything we've done in English to the point where we now can take a kid who is not thinking in the language, they're predominantly translating in their head, and we can get that kid to start thinking in the language in 200 hours. And so, you have to have an education system that's sensitive to that, and it has a huge impact on wages. We measure the wages of our senior high school graduates as well as our college graduates, and we can tell you based on their level of English what pay bands they'll fall into, because this country pays more for English. BPI has a three-stage interview process. The first interview lasts less than 1 minute. It lasts 55 seconds. I'm giving away trade secrets here. I'm not kidding, this is true. And they're looking for 3 things in those 55 seconds, and one of them is English. And you're gonna be a teller. But how are you gonna interact with the guy from China, the guy from India, the guy from Thailand? Through English, right? So they're looking for it, and you won't get through the door to be a teller if your English isn't good enough. So it's a commodity, and you have to deliver it in the Philippines, because for the Philippines, it's a comparative advantage.
Okay, we only have about...
Can I wrap that? I don't disagree with Derrick. English is important, comparative advantage for the Philippines, but many times because I've seen English as a declining skill, the solution has been let's teach English from grade 1. Let's return English to the way it was. I think we need to clarify that the decline of English is not just a decline of English. It's been a decline of the entire education system. As a matter of fact, math, and believe it or not, Filipino skills, our national language skills, have declined even more than the declines in English. In recent years, the improvements in basic education have seen better improvements in English and math and Filipino. The problem is, it's so much easier to identify English weaknesses than math weaknesses. We don't go around asking people to multiply or to, but English you see right away, right? But if you look at it, it's an overall decline of the system. And to put too much emphasis on English is to ignore the fact that the problem has been a decline in the overall state of education in the Philippines, and therefore you ignore a whole bunch of other skill sets, which actually is a sign of a lot of things happening globally. The mass public school systems in many of the countries, including Thailand, has seen declines in their quality. State is giving less and less importance to state-run, government-led basic education systems, which really is, I think, the more against our interest, because we focus on college, but it really is the more important place to focus, which is on basic education.
Okay. I want to put data to that. Can I put data to that? We take in kids in grade 7 and grade 11. There's very little difference in their mathematical capabilities. So when they come to us in grade 7, typical average kid cannot multiply or add fractions successfully. That's the upper limit of their math. It's not any different in grade 11. He's right. So mathematics is not any better. It's just not as obvious. And we see this because we take kids into the Apex system at grade 7 and grade 11, and they're basically stalled.
Yeah, just to clarify that point, in the Apex system, I take it a lot, most, maybe all of your students are basically indicative of the quality of public education entering your school. Is that right?
The vast majority, yeah. Most of them come from the public school system, and they're stepping up. They're getting into private education at a low cost.
In any case, in your school, in your system, you see immediately the gap between the quality of public and private education. How do we close that gap? And if there's any insight from Thailand on how did Thailand raise the quality of its public school system, and how might there be some sharing here, not just between the Philippines and Thailand, but with other developing countries as well?
The first one is that when subjects are down, students are turned off. I would like to suggest that we try out a special incentive system. Let's say maths. If you are, when you do well each period, you get to choose a very good menu for lunch or for break, ice cream, go to the movies. And then kids will work harder towards some incentive. Give them some incentive. There's no incentive. We do not tell kids why they're at school. We cannot tell them how learning math can help your future in any way at all. So we have to relate it to their future. That's the first one. And we're going to try to teach other things. Now, for instance, Kathy was here. She was a chess champion at 10 and then at 12. Why not teach chess in every school? Make it compulsory as part of a subject. Then your brain will start working a bit more. So get them to be more questioning. But to me, the best way to get education improved is not to depend on the organ, the Ministry of Education. It's tired. It means well. It's a bureaucracy. It's like a big oil tanker carrying Shell product. Very hard to turn around. Very hard to turn around. So I would like to suggest that we take a look at two things. One, to see what a school can be. A school is a real diamond, but we're treating it as a piece of glass. Firstly, most schools, I'm talking about rural schools, have land underutilized, have buildings underutilized, have teachers underutilized. Most schools open 200 days a year. There's so much space. And there's no organization that has such support from the community as the school. So here is the place that we should realize that we can turn things around, not only in education, but to use it to do many, many things. That's the first one. The second one, so one is changing the role of the group. The second one is to go for new partners. And what I would like to suggest, and we're trying this out now, luckily the Prime Minister has agreed, to ask the private sector and the universities to come in to help basic education. The government, I've said this roughly yesterday, the government will supply the budget for these government schools, and the private sector will come in with some additional budget, and you can deduct twice 200% from your tax, and improve the education system. The school board will come from the private sector and university and other smarter schools. And they will learn many things. And you can even get professors who are on sabbatical, lecturers sabbatical, who come and act as heads of the school or co-heads of the school and get real practice, because a lot of professors don't know how to manage. This would be a good way to learn how to manage. Except when you're at AIM, that's a different matter. So here's the point. We need new partners coming in, and then you will then get the ideas that exist in the private sector. You will have their staff, you will have their schools, their companies as possible workplaces. All these things we need to do to change education. Unless we do that, we're not going to catch up, and we're all going to be labor, and many of us will be functionally literate in language, but not only that, but also mathematically illiterate. That's even higher. And then finally, we must get down to junior CSR, children's social responsibility. And let's come back to the company, whereby they give some money. Why don't we get the board members to put a part of their director's fee into the ISR fund, which is tax deductible if it goes to education? And that's the full board of directors. But what about all staff members? Why don't we break them up into 4 categories? The one with the lowest salary group, then anything that is in Thailand, if it's not 50 baht, I guess it's about 90 pesos, 50 baht, then you put that into the fund. Another group that is not the 100 baht, you put in up 500 and then 1,000, and everyone can be involved. And before long, you will have people in the company look at what the company is doing, how it can be done better, what about some new ideas, and they will be involved. And I think, and then how can you pass it down to their customers? And this is where I already talked about Shell turning its ship around. Shell in my country has probably the most advanced CSR policy. One is total company. 2, every staff member must be involved, every gas station, and for every customer they have 2 special days, twice a year, and on that day for each liter of gasoline you buy, 1 baht, which is probably 1.8 pesos, goes towards an educational fund program. And all the customers, in fact that's Shell money, but in fact they've turned it around to make the customers feel it's theirs. And they feel really good about it. They follow up and see, when they continue to tell their friends, when you buy Shell, what you're doing, you're getting more and more out of it. So I think we have to rethink CSR and putting it into education also, not only the money side, but the brain of the company, the labor of the company, and the vision of the company, because most of our secondary education and primary education totally lacks vision. It's just to put you through and give you a piece of certificate.
I think we have some questions from the floor. Yes, ma'am.